Hello everyone, this is Tessa Kegel and this is Module 4, Hazardous Substances Management Systems, and in this module we'll be looking at the management of dangerous goods and scheduled poisons and the related regulations. This is the copyright warning which covers this series of lectures. So now just to go over the objectives for this module. At the end of this module and its readings, you should be able to identify and describe the classification for dangerous goods and scheduled poisons, to access, interpret and apply dangerous goods and scheduled poison related information in the workplace, identify the appropriate requirements for and use of expert assistance, and finally develop, evaluate and maintain a safe system of work based on accurate information relating to the control of dangerous goods and scheduled poisons. These are the readings for this module. We have a few readings from Safe Work Australia, so the Model Code of Practice, the Australian Dangerous Goods Code, a couple of articles from the research literature, and then finally the Australian Government Poison Standard, and this is the electronic version as it is currently constantly being updated, so regularly updated, and I've provided the link to the electronic version. Now, within this module, I'll be referring to a number of regulatory and statutory references. Now, unfortunately, not all of these may be relevant to each Australian jurisdiction, so there are constant updates with these, and I've made an effort to be as up to date as possible. However, it really is up to each individual to make sure that the legislation they are using is current for their own jurisdiction. So you'd be expected to source the regulatory and other statutory requirements for your own jurisdiction using the principles and the concepts that I'll lay out within this lecture. So this module reviews the management of dangerous goods, drugs, poisons and other controlled substances. It looks at a number of substances, physical properties which are potentially hazardous in the event of unexpected events. Now, most chemicals, when stored or handled and used correctly, present little or no risk to persons or property. However, there are a number which, because of their physical properties, are potentially hazardous in the event of an unexpected event. So, we need to know the legislation which covers those for unexpected events. Now, dangerous goods are usually classified with reference to immediate risk, whereas hazardous substances are defined in terms of potential, chronic or acute harm usually to the individual. Now, many substances are both hazardous substances as well as dangerous goods, and legislation will apply across both of these classifications. Hazardous substances and dangerous goods. Now, prior to the Work Health and Safety, or the WHS regulations, workplace storage, handling and use of hazardous chemicals were regulated in most jurisdictions under separate instruments for hazardous substances and dangerous goods. Under the Work Health and Safety regulations, both of these are covered under the single framework for hazardous chemicals. So the new hazard classification and hazard communication system based on the United Nations globally harmonised system has been introduced, and this is how dangerous goods are covered under the Work Health and Safety regulation. So as you know, transitional arrangements have been in place. However, we have pretty much now moved to the new legislation. So refresher again, we've covered a lot of this last week. Hazardous substances are those which, following worker exposure, there can be an adverse effect on health, and many hazardous substances are also classified as dangerous goods. Now, some examples of hazardous substances might include poisons, substances that might cause burns or skin irritation and eye irritation, or substances that may cause cancer. So now, what are dangerous goods? Well, dangerous goods are substances, mixtures or articles that, because of their physical, chemical or physicochemical properties or acute toxicity properties, they present an immediate hazard to people, property, or the environment. And dangerous goods are covered under the Australian Code for the transport of dangerous goods by road and rail. However, there are differences by jurisdiction, and once again, I would advise people to look at their own specific jurisdiction to make sure that they are understanding the specific legislation for their jurisdiction. So now we're going on to the Dangerous Goods Code. So the National Transport Commission Dangerous Goods Code. So at the moment we're in the 7.5 edition 2017, and it can be downloaded from this URL, and those details will also be provided on LMS. So this provides details of technical specifications, requirements applicable to the transport of dangerous goods by road and rail. So rules and recommendations covering the definition, classification, packaging, marking and labelling of substances and articles classified or prescribed as dangerous goods, consigning of dangerous goods for transport, loading, storage, load retention and segregation, transport documentation provision, dangerous goods being transported and emergency information, dangerous goods transport, unloading, receipt and transfer, dangerous goods transport including use of vehicles, containers and equipment, and provision of safety equipment. And Part 3 of this document incorporates listings of all dangerous goods of all classes. Now, further to our discussion in Module 3 of the harmonisation, so the globally harmonised system of the management of hazardous substances and hazardous substances in the international format, the 7th edition of the Code of the Dangerous Goods Code adopts the structure, format, definitions and concepts of the United Nations recommendations on the transport of dangerous goods and the transport of dangerous goods Model Regulations 14th Revised Edition, while still retaining Australian specific provisions. In general terms, dangerous goods are classified on the basis of immediate physical or chemical effects. Now, these might be fire, explosion, corrosion or poisoning. These might affect property, the environment or people. Now, this is in contrast to hazardous substances, which are classified only on the basis of health effects to people, whether these be immediate or long-term. Now, this is an important distinction, which is why I've paid attention to this in this lecture. So, once again, dangerous goods are classified on the physical or chemical effects, whereas hazardous substances are classified only on the basis of health effects. Now, in Australia, there are a number of different dangerous goods classes. So, in Australia, dangerous goods are classified to a class according to the most significant risk presented by the goods, and this is determined by criteria aligned with the United Nations recommendations on the transport of dangerous goods model regulations. So the system assigns proper shipping names and United Nations numbers used internationally for quick identification of dangerous goods. So this means that if something is shipped from overseas, all of the numbering should be the same as within the Australian jurisdiction. So this means that there's easy, immediate identification of particular chemicals and so on. So the UN number is 4 digits representing a particular chemical or group of chemicals. Then we had the proper shipping name for a particular substance name used to describe the substance during transport. Then the proper shipping name for a less common substance will usually be generic, a generic description such as a flammable liquid not otherwise specified. So these are for the less common substances. Now, the use of a UN system ensures consistency in classification internationally, as I mentioned previously. And dangerous goods are usually classified into one of 9 different classes. So some dangerous goods present more than one risk, so they may be assigned to one or more secondary or subsidiary risks. However, the class of dangerous goods, the number assigned in the ADG code, must indicate the most predominant hazard, so the most dangerous, the most pressing hazard. And division of dangerous goods, a number of classes of dangerous goods are assigned in the Australian Dangerous Goods Code. Now, we'll be going into this in much more detail within the Collaborate session, and your activities for the module today are around some of this type of classification. There are a number of classes, divisions and packing groups under the Australian Dangerous Goods Codes, and I'll just go into these in a little bit more detail now. So from the ADG code, various substances are defined in different classes. Now there's a numerical order of these classes, however it doesn't mean that class 1 is more dangerous than class 9. Now each of these classes has its own divisions as well as its own particular symbol. So first of all we have class 1 explosives, class 2 gases, Class 3 flammable liquids, Class 4 flammable solids, Class 5 oxidizing substances and organic peroxides, Class 6 toxic and infectious substances, Class 7 radioactive material, Class 8 corrosive substances, and Class 9 miscellaneous dangerous substances and articles, including environmentally hazardous substances. Now I'm just going to talk a little bit about packing groups and relative risks. So dangerous goods classes 3 to 9 are assigned into what are called packing groups. So these are either packing group 1, packing group 2 or packing group 3. Now a packing group refers to a type of packaging which is required for that particular substance. So the more hazardous the particular goods or the particular substance, the more substantial the packaging requirements. Now generally, the packaging group can be used as an indication of the degree of hazard for a particular substance. Packing group 1 indicates high danger, so the most dangerous group. Packing group 2 is medium danger, and then packing group 3 is designated as low danger. However, they still require specialised packing. Dangerous goods classes 3 and 4, divisions 5.1 and 6.1, and class 8, as well as some class 9 substances, have assigned packing groups. Now, packing groups are not assigned to class 1 explosives, class 2 gases and gas mixtures, class 6.2 infectious substances, or class 7 radioactives. Packing group designators are always written in Roman numerals, so packing group 1, packing group 2, packing group 3, as you can see on this slide. And testing which is conducted on a package for packing group 1 product is considerably more stringent than the testing requirements for a packing group 3 product, for example. So when performance testing a dangerous goods package, in order to determine the design of the package meets the minimum performance criteria required by the United Nations and to attain the mandatory United Nations approval, the packaging group of the product to be transported in the package is one of the factors that determines the test protocol. Now, just very quickly, to provide you with some information about Hazchem codes. Now, Hazchem codes are the emergency action code for fire or spillage, which have been adopted by all Australian jurisdictions, which, as you can imagine, is quite useful in terms of the transportation of dangerous goods around Australia. So these are used by emergency response personnel in the initial response phase. However, they offer guidance only on emergency responses. In the final part of this presentation, we just ask you to consider the transportation of dangerous goods within Australia, and all of the issues that might be involved with this transportation. So most of these are covered by the Australian Dangerous Goods Code and other references already discussed. And the Federal Department of Infrastructure also has specific information on dangerous good transportation and requirements at the URL which is listed there. But what we need to keep in mind are the emergency procedure guides, the information presented on safety data sheets, as well as information for fire and spillages involving dangerous goods. And we'll be conducting a few activities within the Collaborate session, which will help us in terms of thinking about this feature, the important implications which come up in terms of transport of various dangerous goods.